range of things I won't go into. Compassion capital to build, nonprofit capacity, a whole bunch of that stuff. The neighborhood now is ready to sort of take advantage of other federal opportunities. So whether they'll get it or not, they're kind of positioning themselves for promise, for choice neighborhoods, for some of these other kinds of things. They've got a huge grant from Gates to build a early childhood center. Again, it was really built off of that early community organizing and trusted advocates. Now, a lot went into that. I would call it, how do you build a platform in a community where there is no capacity to really represent the interests of the neighborhood, but really to use that to acquire new resources. That sounds easy, but it takes, you can imagine, lots of time, and there's lots of glue resources that have to be brought to bear to support that leadership development, to bring in technical assistance, to have startup capital and cash to do that kind of matching work folks mentioned, and then to nudge other stakeholders kind of into the process. So this is a pretty good story, and I can certainly talk more about it, but it's a case of building a platform over time for a low-income community where there isn't capacity to go ahead. But you know, there's another sort of community story around place-based development that needs to be acknowledged. There's a new report out from the Aspen Roundtable that tracks community development, that a lot of these community change efforts, they're often called comprehensive community change, are not getting population level results. All this kind of work, putting all these pieces together, isn't getting the kind of results we want. Lots of reasons for that, but it's sort of a troubling finding. At the same time, out of our Making Connections initiative, we did a lot of surveying and found that in low-income communities, the rate of mobility, not good mobility where you're moving because you're moving up, but mobility because of economic insecurity, is 30, 40, 50% in many inner-city poor neighborhoods. So this notion of place as something static is not there, and it really was a finding it's been challenging for our work. And then finally, this aligning of internal interests, resident voice, and external stakeholder investment strategies really is hard to get right. And lots of folks have got into a lot of trouble with that, or not made the progress that they wanted. So what we're doing now in the foundation is really reflecting on a lot of our work over 20 years for our next generation of work. And some of these only apply to national funders, but I'll share them very quickly. You need to do planning, but sometimes blueprints can be artificial and distracting, particularly if they're put forward by funders. Sometimes in place-based work, we take on too much complexity at once. There's too many things to do, and in trying to do too many things, we get stuck doing a couple things really well. There never seems to be enough capacity on the ground. We say capacity, but it takes resources to do. Many neighborhoods are not connected to what we would call an economic engine, a market. And you can do all the job training in the world, all the basic skills stuff, but there's got to be an economy there. As we know today, that's not a simple thing. And then finally, getting a sufficient number of stakeholders around the table. You just don't need one or two. You don't need to be swamped by a partnership, but you need enough of the major players to make this work. Now, I think going forward, the opportunity is big. I mean, the urban infrastructure kind of writ large is going to be rebuilt over the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And in that, we're going to be building new communities, so that the opportunity to build the capacity to have a voice in this process is big. The feds, probably for the first time in 15 years, have really adopted place as a focus. Folks mentioned livability. There's this Congressional Budget Office memo on place. There's choice. There's sustainable communities. And there's another round of foundation initiatives that are worth paying attention to by groups like Living Cities or the Skillman Foundation in Detroit or the California Endowment. Not all immediately relevant to Illinois, but they're casting off lessons that you may pay attention to. So just by way of conclusion, a few lessons from our work for place-based work. One is you got to support leadership development in the beginning and an ongoing basis, because that's the magic that makes all this work. Neighborhoods need hundreds of leaders kind of brought into the process. They end up playing different roles, but it's important. You need to build a platform, and by platform I mean that kind of partnership of capacity and leadership and relationships that allows you to really respond creatively to opportunities, whether it's resource-wise or in the marketplace. You've got to invest in the long term in these things, because we've found as a foundation, even 10 years can be too short in terms of really affecting a two-generation approach. You really need to work on aligning these internal resources and external actors. We'll come back to that, I'm sure, but it's a really difficult task. And then you really need to develop a set of metrics, measures, and a way of telling the story of what your work accomplished that can really galvanize other actors politically, policy-wise, to really keep at this kind of investment. And then finally, you just need to keep at it. This stuff is, as you all know, is not a simple thing to do and requires really ongoing investment and a lot of passion and hard work. So thank you, and I look forward to your questions.